Welcome to Miles Ahead, the Canadian Points podcast brought to you by frugalflyer.ca. Today we're joined by myself, Reed, Danny, Josh, and Jeff. And today we're going to be talking all about Avios. In the first three episodes of Miles Ahead, we cover the basics of miles and points from a more general standpoint. And now we're excited to be going more in depth into one specific program, one of the programs that all of us here really love. Before we get into the exciting topic that is Avios, we're going to try out a new segment called What's That Credit Card? Perhaps if it goes well, we can end up sponsored by Game Freak. This segment is inspired by, if you've ever watched the original Pokemon at commercial breaks, it would be a What's That Pokemon? And it would be a shadow of the Pokemon, and then it would reveal it at the end of the commercial break. We'll just establish some ground rules for the segment. So I'm going to give off a series of hints about the card, and anyone can guess, just Family Feud style, if you think you know what the card is, but you only get one guess. And once you've guessed, you can't guess again. I guess if nobody guesses it right, then we can replenish the guesses. And no Googling or consulting with any outside sources. And whoever guesses the card correctly gets a pat on the back, and we'll have a little discussion about some of the value that we see in this particular card. So this card that I'm thinking of has the color blue on its card face and also in the logo of the bank that issues it. The points it earned can be used for travel. It's a Visa card. The points currency earned by the card starts with the letter A, and the card has no minimum income requirements.
RBC Ion Plus.
That is incorrect.
Oh.
Good guess. I've got to go with the RBC Avion Visa Platinum, but I'm thinking it has an income requirement, so I'm not sure.
That is correct, Josh. Good job.
Oh, wow. I thought for sure it had a low income requirement. That's good to know.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. All right, boys, take us away.
Yeah. Even better knowing that it doesn't have an income requirement. You know, it's any of the cards that earn Avion rewards are fantastic and some of the ones that I value the most in my credit card portfolio. I don't know about you, Reed, but I know probably everyone on this call at least holds the higher end version, the RBC Avion Visa Infinite card, just because it always has a great welcome bonus, and obviously it's transferable to a number of currencies, including British Airways Avios, as well as WestJet Rewards and American Airlines Advantage.
Yeah, it's a fantastic card. I think all of us probably gravitate to the Visa Infinite version. I mainly just mentioned the Platinum to try to trick everyone, but yeah, I mean, both of them are pretty similar welcome bonus. If you start off with the Visa Infinite, you can get cash back as well, going through cash back sites.
It's also nice with it not having a income requirement. I mean, I know when I started in this hobby, shortly after getting out of school, you know, I just didn't have the income levels to meet a lot of those higher cards. So it's nice to have an option available that still is a really good card and offers a really good bonus for those who are starting out or those who are, you know, have a little bit less income than what's required for the more premium cards.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I know, I mean, anyone who's listened to the first three episodes has already heard us bring up this card multiple times. So it's definitely one of the cards that we recommend for people starting out as easy to get into the miles and points hobby.
No minimum spend requirement either is nice.
That's right. Yep.
That's right. Yeah. Earn the full bonus with just getting approved, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, other than from time to time, it does have an elevated 55,000 Avion bonus, which is the first 35 is typically no spend requirement, and then you can earn another chunk by spending, I think it's 5,000.
Yeah,
usually.
Yeah. So
that was a good guess, Danny, by the way, because I felt like he was going to try to throw a curveball, and that's what I was gravitating towards.
And I learned something new. I thought that the Platinum had an income requirement, and it was just lower, because that's how they do with like the CIBC Aventure Gold and stuff, right?
That's just it. Like I was thinking it had like a 12 or 15K income requirement, but you know,
entertaining and educational. Reed Sutton.
There we go.
You've done it again.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to not even mention the income requirement, and then I realized all of you would just guess the Avion Visa Infinite, so that would have been awkward. So, of course, one of the biggest benefits of the Avion card that Josh mentioned was the ability to transfer those points to British Airways Avios, which is the subject of today's episode. We'll start out by going over what is Avios and some of the basics of the program. Does anyone want to take a crack at defining Avios?
Well, Jeff, I think you wrote an excellent article on how to avoid taxes and fees. So why don't you start us off by describing what is Avios?
So Avios is a shared currency between multiple programs. It's most commonly associated with British Airways, but you can transfer these points freely between British Airways, Iberia, Finnair, Aer Lingus, Qatar Airways. And British Airways is a program that's quite notorious for its really, really high taxes and fees. So generally, when you make a redemption with British Airways Avios, you're going to be doing it with a program other than British Airways to avoid those taxes and fees. Some common ones are Aer Lingus, Qatar Airways, and Finnair.
Yeah, so within all of those programs, like Jeff said, the best part is points can be transferred back and forth. It's very unique in the loyalty program area to see a currency that can go both directions, and they all transfer at a ratio of 1-to-1, and transfers are usually instant, making it really easy to move points around in order to make the perfect redemption.
And just to be clear, we're talking about transferring Avios between frequent flyer programs. We're not talking about sending Avios points from your frequent flyer account back to your bank. It is a within frequent flyer transfer. Once they're in the frequent flyer ecosystem, they cannot be sent back to your financial institution.
That's right. And I think Avios actually calls it, the technical term is combining, but in essence, you're transferring it between the programs and it's just able to go back and forth at will. So we already talked about the Avion card as a great way to acquire Avios. For Canadians, what are some of the best ways to earn British Airways Avios?
Not to sound like a broken record, but just to restate the importance of the RBC Avion Visa Infinite card. For those who don't know, you can actually get a new RBC card every 91 days. And oftentimes, when you're earning Avion rewards, a couple times a year, RBC puts on promotions where you can transfer your Avion rewards to Avios at an increased rate of up to 30% extra points, which is a massive bonus when you're looking to make a high point redemption on Avios.
So yeah, one thing that I know we get questions asked a lot is somewhere buried in the terms and conditions of the RBC Avion cards, it states if you have or have had an Avion card, you're ineligible for the bonus. So I guess a question for the group is it the case that that's true, or is there just no IT in RBC?
I would say read between the lines is the best way I can put it on that one, where no matter it's a bank, a program, an offer, even non-miles and points related, oftentimes what is written is very different than reality in my experience.
Copy that. No IT in RBC.
I'll also say if you want to play it safe, there's the RBC Avion Visa Infinite, but you can also earn Avion through the RBC Avion Visa Platinum, so you could sign up for that intermittently, as well as rather than transferring Avion to Avios, you can start with RBC offers a co-branded card with British Airways, the RBC British Airways Visa Infinite. So you can also start with that card, which earns up to 60,000 Avios, so a little bit actually more than you could get from the Avion cards, but it does have a higher spend requirement tied to that. So,
and it also has a higher annual fee too, I believe.
Right.
I think it's 160 or 165. I'm not remembering it off the top of my head.
I think it's 165. So if I've been earning on RBC, are there any other opportunities in Canada that you guys like to take advantage of for earning Avios?
I find RBC gives me enough Avios for my travel goals, but for someone who, is looking for another method, American Express membership rewards, which we've also talked about extensively in previous episodes, is another avenue. They're a transfer partner to British Airways. So, and also with either of those programs, there's from time to time transfer bonuses that are offered. So if you time things right, you can sometimes get higher than one-to-one transfer rates. For instance, sometimes RBC offers a 30% transfer bonus when you transfer Avion to Avios.
Yeah, those 30% transfer bonuses can really add up, not only just on the welcome bonus amount of points that you're going to earn, but for example, the card that I thought was hiding behind the shadow before a commercial break, the RBC Ion Plus, that card earns 3 points per dollar at gas stations, which if you take into account a 30% transfer bonus, it's earning almost 4 points per dollar at gas stations, which is just absolutely unheard of and double what the next card earns in Canada as an earn rate. So if you're earning 4 points per dollar and then you redeem them for a high cent per point redemption, you can get a really nice return on your everyday spending.
Absolutely. I will say if you are earning on either the RBC Ion or the RBC Ion Plus card that Danny was talking about, in order to transfer to British Airways Avios, you do need to hold either a Visa Infinite or Platinum card. Else, on those Ion cards, you will only be able to transfer to WestJet as a partner, unfortunately. So it's kind of a good multi-card solution if you're really looking to maximize.
Yeah, really good point, Josh. And I guess the last thing that you can earn with British Airways Avios is going to be through their Airbnb portal. I've missed so many opportunities to earn 2 or 3 Avios per dollar that I spend on Airbnbs, but that's a really nice opportunity if you're not going to go the route of staying at a chain hotel, or if there's nothing around you that looks appealing. And remember to click through that Airbnb portal and you'll earn 2 or 3 Avios per dollar.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link to that portal in the show notes.
So we've touched on Canada. Of course, there's a number of opportunities to earn Avios in Canada, which is fantastic, but there's even more in the United States. And for those who are in the know with US credit cards, you know that the opportunities in the United States with this hobby are unmatched compared to elsewhere. So what do you guys think about earning Avios in the States? What are kind of your go-to methods if you've ever used them? Everybody out here is just transferring their MR to like Aeroplan and shit. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, I personally, as I mentioned, I find just with RBC, I can earn more than enough. But that's the luxury of Avios is it's probably the easiest currency to earn in both Canada and the US. But for people who have access to the US and who have a higher requirement for Avios, there's a lot of other options down there as well. So Amex membership rewards, the US version, for example, can be transferred to British Airways Avios, as well as some of the other Avios programs. And they, from time to time, have transfer bonuses, I believe. Another option there is Chase issues co-branded cards with each of the Avios airlines. I probably wouldn't recommend that because of something called the 524 rule with Chase, which is we're not going to get into because it's a deep topic, but essentially you want to kind of conserve your credit hits with Chase for some of the more lucrative programs that earn ultimate rewards.
I think if you were going to pick one program from the US to transfer to British Airways Avios, it would probably be, in my opinion, Chase, just because Chase is pretty reliable with their transfer bonuses. It's usually only 20%, so it's not the 30% you might get in Canada, but they're pretty reliable with them. And then once you're kind of in the Chase ecosystem, especially with US credit cards, you can really rack up the points in a hurry. So that would probably be my go-to one.
Honestly, I think you could transfer from any of the banks in the US. I mean, if you're deep enough in as a Canadian that you have more cards than just from Amex and Chase, you probably know this already. But for somebody who's just getting started, there's like 5 different bank programs that all transfer to some flavor of Avios. So whether you have Wells Fargo or whether you have Citi, or whether you have Capital One or Chase or Amex, all 5 of those bank currencies can all be transferred to Avios. So it's definitely the easiest currency to earn. And it's awesome for us because you've got so many great redemption partners that we're going to talk about a little bit later.
So as we mentioned earlier in the episode, Avios is an all-encompassing program that has many programs that participate within it. So we have British Airways Avios, Qatar, Iberia, AerClub, and Finnair.
Can't forget about Vueling. Vueling participates as well.
Absolutely.
We definitely
red-headed
forget about
stepchild.
Vueling.
Yeah. So obviously, a lot of the times, especially if you're earning in Canada, you're transferring your points into the Avios program, into the British Airways Executive Club, which is kind of your main bank account. So what are those opportunities in which you would transfer Avios to these different programs?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many. The first one that comes to my mind is obviously British Airways. If you really need to get to London, you can pay the high taxes and fees, but I think we're up to 80,000 points for a one-way business class redemption, and then you still have to pay 40,000 points. Or excuse me, you still have to pay $400 Canadian in taxes and fees per person per direction. So it's not cheap, but you could do that.
Yeah, and I think if we back up for a sec to talk about like why would you want to transfer away from British Airways? British Airways is notorious for having very high taxes and fees on their, both as part of their program, but also on their airline. So that's one of the reasons why, there's sometimes opportunities that arise from transferring to these other programs where you can make redemptions that save you in the taxes and fees portions of your ticket.
Well, and then also, like, we've got different award charts between the different partners. So, for example, British Airways charges you per segment. So if you're flying from, well, let's make it an easy example. If you're flying from Montreal to the Maldives and you connect through London with British Airways, you're probably going to pay 140,000 points for that ticket. But if you fly from Montreal to the Maldives through Doha with Qatar Airways, which transfers at a 1-to-1 ratio from British Airways, you'll pay 85,000 points. And arguably, it's subjective, you'll have a much better experience and pay a lot less in taxes and fees. So that's why you would transfer your points from British Airways to maybe one of their partners.
Mm-hmm. It's also worth mentioning, so all of these programs participate in the One World Alliance. And so generally, you can redeem their points for airlines that are part of the One World Alliance. However, all of these airlines also have individual non-alliance partners. And so there's situations where you can transfer your points to another Avios program, and it opens up an opportunity to book an airline that you couldn't book with, say, British Airways. So some quick examples are Bangkok Airways and JetBlue can be booked with Qatar Avios, and then Avianca and LATAM can be booked on Iberia, for example.
So there's also different cancellation policies within every Avios program. So you might find more favorable terms, whether that be cheaper cancellations or greater flexibility or cheaper changes within different programs. So it could be worth moving your Avios to a different program before booking to take advantage of those benefits. So transferring Avios, or combining them as they tend to call it within their system, is pretty straightforward. It usually requires you to have an account with that separate frequent flyer program. So for example, if I am looking to transfer from British Airways Executive Club to Qatar Airways Privilege Club, I do need to have an account with both of those. The process is different between each two accounts that you're looking to move from. I will say you are always going to be moving from British Airways Executive Club as your main bank or hub into a separate program. We do have an article on Frugal Flyer that Kieran wrote that's all about how you can combine Avios in between programs and how you can transfer them. So check that out if you want to learn more. For an example, with Qatar, as I mentioned, once you have those two accounts set up, you do simply just need to go in and link them. And then you're able to go into your Qatar Airways Privilege Club account and move points back and forth as frequently in as large or small amounts as you want. It's really straightforward. There are a few restrictions. So for Iberia, for example, your account does need to be open for 90 days before. I know months and months ago, Danny did write an article on some of the top 10 miles and points mistakes that people make, and he recommended open pretty much all your frequent flyer programs as early as you can, and that's a fantastic tip that rings true. when working with Avios. Get those accounts opened so you're able to move things.
Pause this episode right now, go look at that article, open up all those frequent flyer accounts, and come on back to us.
Absolutely. It'll only benefit you down the line.
Yeah, and then there's a few funny things with Iberia as well. I've seen mixed reports on this, but for some people, they're experiencing problems with their transfers not going through from British Airways to Iberia if there hasn't been any activity in their Iberia account, even if it's been open for 90 days. So one of the most creative hacks, if you'll call it, that I've seen for this, Iberia has a shopping portal, just like the Aeroplan shopping portal, and you can buy something cheap like a pair of socks or dish soap and just send it to a random hotel that you may or may not stay at in the future. You'll get your 8 or 9 or 10 Avios, and that counts as qualifying activity to potentially get over that hurdle.
That's a good tip.
So it has to be organically earned. You couldn't just transfer in, say, membership rewards?
That's right. Yeah. So in the past, if you had U.S. membership rewards, I think U.S. membership rewards transfer to Iberia, if you just set the transfer, it wouldn't go through. And even in the past, some people were finding that you could, transfer 3,000 points from Bonvoy and you can get your Bonvoy to Iberia and that'll work. But some people have even had that become an issue. So using the shopping portal is kind of a last resort. But then again, there's other reports of people having no problems whatsoever. So this whole Avios ecosystem is not perfect, but that's one of the reasons why we have these opportunities to take advantage of more favorable or less favorable award charts and programs.
Yep. So would it be fair to say for someone doing their first transfer, it makes sense to start from British Airways? Because I believe for all the programs, you can initiate the transfer from British Airways, but not all of them allow you to kind of pull the transfer from the other partner. I know Qatar does, but...
Yeah, I think get your British Airways Executive Club account set up, get familiar within there. And then if you are targeting a certain redemption, such as Q Suites or whatever, you could then set up an account and link that. Majority of the time, you are going to be moving Avios from logged in to your British Airways Executive Club account and moving those elsewhere outside of some unique ones. So speaking on that, am I the only one here who uses the British Airways household account, or does anybody else take advantage of that?
I have one set up as well, but it didn't do what I wanted it to. So I thought that if I pooled all my British Airways Avios together, then I would be able to book an award on the Qatar Airways website, because that particular award I wanted to book was only available on the Qatar Airways website, and it did not work. So what we had to do is then disband the pool, and I had to pay, in this case, it was $100 to transfer 85,000 Avios to my wife's account for her to book us into Qatar first class.
Yeah. So I do like the program. I always love when frequent flyer programs have some sort of family or household sharing. I will say, similar to you, Danny, my experience has been near identical. I found value in booking Japan Airlines through British Airways Executive Club, and the household sharing worked really great between myself and my significant other. But when we booked our Maldives trip for last January, we ran into that exact same thing where I had a large chunk of Avios and I had to pay to transfer a good chunk to her so she could book our return flights. So minor inconvenience, still for, I'm sure you feel the same where, you had to spend $100, but you still got far more value out of that than the $100 would have given you elsewhere. But it's definitely not as intuitive with the family sharing or household account as it is with other programs. So you just have to be aware of those little kind of gotchas as you're working through the earning Avios.
Yeah, another little tip, and this applies to not just Avios, but just in general, anytime you're doing a points transfer, you always want to make sure that everything matches exactly in terms of your name, email address, and physical address, and any other information, your loyalty program number, for example. Because if there's any mismatch, then it may prevent the other program from being able to receive the points, and they could go into limbo or whatnot.
Yep. Excellent point, Reed. The one thing I have to add to that is if you have a hyphenated name, good luck. Qatar Airways does not accept hyphenated names. And actually, when we got married, my wife and I were like, oh, what are we going to do for last names, to say out the other thing? And I said, it's not worth the hassle. You are going to keep your last name the way that it is because of all the different loyalty accounts and everything that we have. It's 2024. We're going to be progressive, but also I don't want to have to deal with all of these loyalty program name changes. So if you have a hyphenated name, I feel for you. You're probably going to have issues with all of these different Avios programs. None of us here can speak to exact experiences with it, but there are quite a few data points out there if you look into how to deal with that as a hyphenated last name.
It's funny you mentioned that my significant other's first name is hyphenated, and we haven't had any issues with Avios, but we've had issues with other programs, literally as we're seeing award availability slip through our fingers, and it ended up in me kindly brute forcing an Amex chat agent to just push the transfer through to the number that I provided, and it went through. But yeah, hyphenated names, hell on earth, I guess is what we'll call it when it comes to miles and points.
Yep, computers just don't get it.
Yep. So within Avios, all of the programs do what is called peak or off-peak pricing. All of them do this except for Finnair. And so that means, during peak periods, you will see flights and those redemptions cost more. Off-peak will cost less or at a normal amount. Jeff, I know you said you did some research before this episode. Do you mind sharing what you found?
Yeah, so I'll just provide a few examples here. So, for example, on Qatar Airways flights, and I'm just talking about business class here, you're going to pay about 35% more on a peak date when you redeem for a Qatar Airways flight. So you're looking at 94,500 on the peak dates versus 70,000 on off-peak dates. And for Aer Lingus flights, you're looking at about 20% more points. So 50,000 Avios points versus 60,000. And economy is actually nearly 50% more. So a non-peak economy flight on Aer Lingus will run you 13,000 points. And we're talking about between North America and Europe, by the way, versus 20,000 on a peak date on Aer Lingus. So those are just a couple examples just to give you an idea of the differences versus peak and off-peak pricing.
So Qatar Airways does something unique in this space where they have Saver Awards and they have what they call Flexi Awards. So Saver Awards are the ones that you want to be searching for. These are the ones that would be 85,000 Avios from, Montreal or Seattle to Doha through to the Maldives. It's a fantastic redemption, a couple $100 in taxes, well worth it. Saver Rewards are the ones that are very difficult to find. They may release to a flight. You're usually either searching super close in for extra availability or you're searching 11 months out, 12 months out. The difference between these Saver Awards and the Flexi Awards on Qatar Airways are massive. So as I mentioned, a Saver Award from Montreal to Doha to Male is 85,000 Avios. If you're booking a Flexi Award, it's 170,000 Avios per person, per way. Now, if you have hundreds of thousands or millions of Avios, whatever, who cares? Perhaps you're fine with just, spending the points on Flexi since you still get to fly Qatar Airways, which is a fantastic experience. But doubling the cost means that you're just getting kind of screwed on the pricing.
Yep, I definitely agree with that it's expensive, but I would actually argue the ability to fly in Qatar Airways excellent business class for, if you take advantage of a transfer bonus at 30% from RBC, 120,000 points per person, not the worst deal that we've ever seen. I mean, like some programs such as Aeroplan or Flying Blue, they'll charge 300, 400,000, and you're not going as far. And it's also a subpar product. So the ability to redeem basically 120,000 RBC points if you've transferred during a transfer bonus, that's not the worst deal ever.
Yeah, honestly, I agree, especially once you step up your ability to earn miles and points. If there was a certain day I needed to fly on or wanted to fly on, I wouldn't hesitate at this point. Definitely, it's that shift in mindset we talked a little bit about last episode once you start earning so many points, right?
And I would also add that if you're looking to book for more than 2 people, you're most likely going to run into paying the Flexi award rate for at least some of those people. And paying that Flexi award rate might actually be worth it because you might actually be able to sit in the quad, which is a really cool seating concept that Qatar Airways has in their Q suites.
So as far as peak and off-peak go, I believe these are published in advance. These calendars are published in advance by each of the programs. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. They're all published in advance. And while it might sound like there's a lot of peak and very little off-peak, a lot of the programs are very generous. And you might think, oh, I don't really want to go to Spain in January, but they classify off-peak dates up until like all June. So you can get around really good time at off-peak, quote-unquote, dates.
Right. And there might be an arbitrage there if different programs don't have the same peak and off-peak. So that's why it's always good to check pricing with more than one program if you're looking at redeeming Avios.
So I'd love to hear more about kind of the unique opportunities or sweet spots that you guys favor within the various Avios programs that are available. I don't mind kicking it off. If you haven't already noticed throughout the call, big fan of Qatar Airways and their business and first class product. If you can find availability, so if you were to do anywhere from North America, I tend to gravitate towards Seattle or Montreal through to Doha. And then if you append on a second leg, whether that be Doha to Bangkok, Doha to Male, anything like that, and you can find first class availability on that second leg, it doesn't charge anything more. So you can still fly Seattle to Doha in business class, Doha to Male in first class, and you would pay the same amount in miles and points that if you flew Doha to Male in business class. Yet completely elevated experience. You know, if you want the chance to try a $500 bottle of champagne, there's your chance. Caviar, there's your chance. It's very rare for things to price like this when making redemptions, so it's definitely something I try to share with as many people as I can, as it's a fantastic redemption.
Yeah, that is a great redemption. This isn't a redemption I've taken yet, but I've been looking into it. And I recently learned that on Iberia, flying from the US East Coast to Madrid or Barcelona is actually priced for business class under 40,000 Avios one way. So that's another good option.
Yeah, it's 34,500 Avios per person per direction, and take advantage of a transfer bonus. Let me just quickly do some math on that right now. But 34,500.
So I was actually just doing that calculation myself, and with a 30% bonus, it works out to 26,500 points, which is crazy value for a 7-hour lie-flat business class seat.
Yeah, some of my other new ones with the addition of Finnair to the Avios community is a really surprising one that I didn't slip. It slipped through the cracks when I first looked at the opportunity. But you can redeem 75,000 Avios and 200 Canadian dollars to fly from Toronto Pearson to Hong Kong on Cathay Pacific in business class. And the Finnair website is really easy to use from a searching perspective. You can search from a whole week at a time. So there is actually some availability in March and April of next year. If you're looking to go to Hong Kong, you can even find for 2 people. So again, with a transfer bonus, that's crazy value, because for Cathay Pacific Asia miles, with Cathay Pacific's own currency, they want 110,000 miles per person for the same flights. So not only do you save a whole bunch of miles, but you can also pack that in with a transfer bonus too.
Okay, so one of the other neat benefits of British Airways and Avios as well is that they guarantee award seats on each flight. British Airways guarantees 4 business class seats, 2 premium economy seats, and 8 in economy. And Finnair guarantees a minimum of 2 seats in business class, and I don't have the numbers for premium economy and economy, but that's something good to keep in mind. And I'll just quickly mention the booking windows for these different programs because they're all slightly different. Qatar Airways and Finnair allow you to book 361 days in advance, while British Airways and Aer Lingus are limited to 355 days in advance. So if you're looking to snap up a award seat very quickly, you want to look to Qatar Airways and Finnair for having the first chance at an award seat.
Yeah, good one, Jeff. Two of my favorite lesser known things about booking British Airways with reducing your taxes and fees is if you book with a currency like Iberia and you start outside of the UK, you'll avoid your air passenger duty if you fly through as a connection. So the Iberia award chart lets you fly in first class starting in Europe. So let's say you start in Madrid and then fly to London, have a layover in London, not a stopover, and carry it to the USA. And you would only pay 85,000 Avios, and it's still a lot, but $500 for first class. So British Airways first class is not one of the leaders of the pack, but I don't think there's any other program that will allow you to fly in first class for 85,000 Avios only. For that long of a flight, you can definitely add on, like we're talking about, to the Maldives, but from Doha to the Maldives is only 4 hours. And then also flying British Airways completely outside of London. There's some Fifth Freedom routes, which if you don't know what a Fifth Freedom route is, basically an opportunity to fly on an airline that doesn't operate within its own country. So British Airways flies around in the Bahamas before it ultimately goes back to Britain. And you can pay only 9,750 Avios in economy to fly from Grand Cayman to Nassau. And they do that with a 777. So if you want to pay the extra 7,000 to fly business, only an hour and a half flight, but you do that. So the taxes and fees are less than $100 for both of those opportunities, and you could try out British Airways.
Yeah, so I think all of these kind of sweet spots are just scratching the surface in terms of all the different ways that you can make use of the Avios program. And I think that's kind of an amazing point of value for the program. At the same time, that could be something that might overwhelm someone just getting into or who's new to the Avios program. I thought we could kind of summarize the previous discussion by pointing out a single point or a single sentence about each program and about their main value proposition. So for me with British Airways, it's the default program. Most of us are going to be earning our points in that program to begin with. And it has a standout feature from the other programs, which is the ability to pool points. So you may be able with British Airways Avios to get enough points to make a redemption faster, especially if you're looking at booking for more than one person. Josh, with Qatar, what would you summarize as the value there?
Yeah, I love Qatar Airways Privilege Club. They do itinerary pricing versus segment pricing, which means you can fly the long way to Bangkok, for example, through Doha and pay a completely reasonable amount. Qatar Airways Q Suites is a must-try product. I hope to be able to fly it again soon, but I've flown it twice round trip. It's fantastic. And finally, the fact you can tack on a first class segment instead of a business class and pay the same price is nutty and definitely worth taking advantage of. Jeff, what do you think about the main value of Aer Lingus?
So the reason why we really like Aer Lingus is because they have really nice award pricing from North America to Dublin. 13,000 points in economy is a really, really good deal. And when you factor in the 30% transfer bonus that you should be able to take advantage of, I don't think you're going to find a lower economy flight to Europe from North America. And it's also, when I did the flight with my wife and I about a couple of years ago, the flight's under 6 hours. So it's honestly really doable in economy if you're willing to sit in economy. So that's something to keep in mind. And you do get the additional window of 361 days to book in advance. So you'll have first shot at those award seats. And for Finnair, they also have excellent award pricing from anywhere in North America to Helsinki. You're looking at 62,500 points in business class. I know a few people that just flew on their business class and they said it was terrific. And again, when you're factoring in that 30% transfer bonus, you're looking at 48,000 points for a business class transatlantic flight. Doesn't get much better than that, I think.
Yeah, and then wrapping up here with Iberia, the fifth flavor of relevant Avios. So with Iberia, again, the main thing you're going to be using the points for is that excellent route that Reed talked about a little bit earlier on, traveling from US East Coast. So think cities like Boston, New York. You'll be able to redeem 34,000 Avios one way for a business class ticket per person. And then again, with a 30% transfer bonus, 25% transfer bonus that happens every year from RBC, you're going to be getting an excellent deal. And when we compare that to something like Air France, which would maybe be the next cheapest option redeeming points, you're still going to be paying 50,000 points for a one-way unless you find a promo reward, which are super hard to find. So even at regular pricing, 34,000 Avios, 68,000 Avios round trip, you're only paying 18,000 more Avios for a round trip itinerary with regular pricing without any transfer bonus compared to the next closest competitor at Air France at 50,000 Flying Blue points. So it really is probably the best sweet spot to get to Europe, and that's what you're going to be using mainly with the Iberia program.
Yep, great summary. Yeah, so we've covered a ton on Avios. I think the other big takeaway from this, and something we talk about with Aeroplan too, is that if you're not already earning Avios, then you should be. And even though British Airways is the core program, there's so many different options to use Avios to redeem on all kinds of different airlines and routes. So yeah, definitely something for people to open up a rabbit hole there with Avios.
So we have one question this episode from Taylor. We appreciate everyone who sends in their questions on frugalflyer.ca/podcast. We love getting them, and you'll definitely see a segment in all future episodes where we answer at least one of your questions. So Taylor writes in that they're appreciative of doing a podcast for Canadians as they've only listened to US podcasts in the past. And we agree that's why we launched it. We're really happy to be able to provide relevant information for Canadians. They do mention that, we've talked a lot about Aeroplan and Air Canada within the past, and they've had a few bad experiences with Air Canada, which has resulted in them steering clear of the program and the airline for a few years. They're a little skeptical to use Air Canada Aeroplan as a result of these bad experiences, but of course want to use them because they're interested in optimizing miles and points. They wanted to know if we can provide some context around why we prefer Air Canada from a point perspective, but also from a customer service perspective due to the bad experiences they've had. So, Reed, I know you've had your range of experiences with Air Canada, so what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree. I had probably my worst airline and airport experience with Air Canada. It was during COVID, so there's a factor there, but I essentially got stranded at Toronto Airport, and in the same trip, my luggage was damaged by Air Canada. So dealing with them was obviously stressful and left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I would also say before I even got into miles and points, I didn't fly as much, but I tended to prefer WestJet. I thought their customer service was better at the time. But through my increased travel experience now, I've found that the reality is, and maybe this is a bit pessimistic, but all of the airlines screw up. All of them have big lapses in customer service. And so bad experiences can happen with any airline. I've had horrible experiences with WestJet getting stranded in Comox now. And so I would say you've got to look past the customer service piece and really look at the actual program itself. And when you compare Aeroplan and WestJet, Aeroplan's the clear winner. And I'll let the rest of the guys talk about some of the other reasons for that. But also speaking to Air Canada, another reason why Aeroplan is so good is that it allows you to fly a lot of different airlines. You don't have to fly Air Canada with Aeroplan. Yeah. Any other thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head at the end there, Reed. With Aeroplan, I think they've got, I know they have over 20 partners. And I think it's up to like 25 or 26 different airlines you can use your Aeroplan points on. So when we're talking about collecting Aeroplan miles, you are affiliated with Air Canada, but you never actually have to step foot on an Air Canada plane to maximize the return that you get from your Aeroplan points. So I totally agree that Air Canada has had a bad track record and they haven't got a lot of things right, but airlines have a tough job. There's a lot of things that they can't control, like the weather that goes into some of their decision making. And as much as they do skirt the law by using unexpected maintenance, this, that, the other thing as excuses for why we're delayed, you're going to end up with poor experiences with every airline at some point or another. So yes, it's not ideal, but it's the most rewarding program by a wide margin. And we've talked at length about WestJet rewards and the games that they play with $1 base fares and all that stuff. So there's plus and minuses to every program, and the Aeroplan program provides the most flexibility and the most return when we're talking about an overall rebate from your travel.
Yeah, I think even from a customer service standpoint, there's also ebbs and flows. I would say in the last year, we've seen WestJet get absolutely and justifiably raked over the coals for some of their mishaps, especially recently with the strike scares. So yeah, it's one of the unfortunate realities is dealing with that. It's one of the troubles of flying, but using miles and points, all the more reason to kind of improve the travel experience from that perspective.
Yeah, totally. And actually, Reed, talking about ebbs and flows, I was traveling in Calgary and I was really looking forward to visiting the WestJet Elevation Lounge because it's like the best lounge and it's on Priority Pass. And I walked up to the lounge and they said, even for WestJet elites, it's a 30-minute wait. So I said, well, I'm not doing that. And I turned around and went to the Air Canada Lounge, strolled right in, got a drink at the bar. Everything was fine. So you've definitely had moments where the Air Canada Lounge is packed and the WestJet Lounge is empty. And in this particular one, there was no hope getting into the WestJet Lounge and there was no problem at all walking into the Air Canada one. So you're going to have good and bad experience with everybody. And in Canada, we don't have much choice, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely one of the downsides of the landscape of airlines in Canada versus our neighbors, but we make do with what we got. All right, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Miles Ahead. A reminder to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We really appreciate all the questions we've been getting so far, so keep those coming, and we'll make sure to answer at least one every episode, if not more.